So how did the two of you work together? Did you hand in things in pieces, or did you hand in the whole thing at the very end?
Pieces.
How did it work?
This was another thing that I was learning, because I had about 100 pages, which was what the novel sold based on, but it wasn't finished, and those 100 pages had come very easily, and I thought, this is going to be like no big deal, guys. And then the next 100, 200 pages were agony, and I think it had to do with both because I'd sold it, it ceased to be something just for me, it now was something that people were waiting on. So in the beginning I would show her anything I had, and then she's such a great reader that I didn't want to burn her out on reading the same thing with slightly different, changes, and so I tried to keep it. I tried to do it in larger chunks, and I think this time we're going to do another book together, I will do that as well, because there's nothing, you can't ever ask anyone to read it for the first time a second time. And so mainly she just encouraged me at that point. We weren't really editing so much as she was just pulling pages from me and getting the work physically done, and then once we had the whole, then the editing process, I would say, started in earnest.
Do you remember a moment when you were working on the book? There's a quote from Robert Frost where he says, "No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader," which I think is really true, but it's also true for laughs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember a moment that you hit in the novel where you just laughed out loud at yourself?
No, I don't know. Well, yes, of course, so many. I couldn't stop laughing. No, I probably don't, but I definitely know there are things that I still find funny. There's some characters who I really love, the old agent, and I love all the exchanges with the father, because it reminds me of my father, but it isn't. But I just like the ways in which people misunderstand show business and endlessly ask you, especially when you're starting out, what feels like the wrong question, and they all seem to boil down to, why aren't you working more, and you're like, you have no idea, this is really hard, but to me the whole sequence where she falls off the stage, it's horrible, but it's funny, and I had given it to, not my book agent, but my agent, who's a fast-talking man agent, and he was like, oh gosh, she's so worried about stuff all the time. And I was like, what? I was like, it's funny. Didn't you find it funny? And he was like, she's worried about her hair. It's like, yeah, that's what I'm worried about.
Like a major character.
I know. But certain men just don't get it. So I don't know. There are things that to me, actually, I thought it would be more laugh out loud funny. And now working on this second book, which takes place in LA, it's so much easier to make fun of LA. I have such nostalgia for, again, it's me, but it's not me, but I definitely was remembering the time of living in Brooklyn in the 90s, and I had such nostalgia for it that it came out more sweet and less snappy.
As somebody who has been endlessly ticked off about people assuming that my novels are autobiographical, because that suggests that I don't have it together enough to actually create fiction.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that a lot of this is fiction, but is there any little scene or person in this who is based really, in most of my books there's somebody where I can say to myself, yeah, that's so-and-so.
Well, because I am a person who's in a public job already, I would say I went out of my way. I certainly didn't want to write about any relationship or friendship that people could point to, or that anyone in my life might, be so vain they thought the song was about them, And so I went out of my way not to have any kind of, event or anything like that. I did have a roommate in Brooklyn, but I don't think the character of Jane quite does her justice, but she is here tonight, Kathy. So I would say, Kathy was my Jane in that we were great friends, we were roommates, we were confidants, but I found I have often played the sassy best friend in something, and I always feel like, why doesn't the sassy best friend have more to do? I mean, the person I'm the most interested in is the sassy best friend, and this was my first experience where I was like, wow, I had so much more for the sassy best friend to do, but ultimately, I kind of needed it to be more about this main story, you know, and there was Jane had a whole other subplot that I ended up cutting. Sorry, Jane. And but so that was an interesting just realization for me that, you know, so I would say that person has some of, but is not as witty and smart as Kathy, but I tried to make her close.
All right, well, I'm just going to tell the readers in the audience to keep an eye out, because there's a very tiny, very perky, very ambitious blonde actress in this book, and I am convinced she is based on a real person.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I would say she's based on a lot of real people. There's no particular, I wanted the idea of someone who is a rival but a friend, because that's so present in your 20s, I think, but also in show business, you are happy for people and they're happy for you, kind of, except when you got a job they really wanted, you know, so there are a lot of people I've known over the years, and also it was important to me that they weren't real, it wasn't something ugly, it wasn't like an ugly female rivalry, but it was just funny enough that it wasn't great, you know, but who do you think it is? Talk later. Oh. I hardly know her now, and I didn't know her then. But it does invite people. It's casting. That's a great casting choice, because everybody has to be like 25. But yes, you could see that kind of chirpiness, let's say, in that character, Penelope.
Well, let me ask you about casting. Don't you think this would make a great movie or TV series?
I think, to me, this is a series, because the nature of this life of being an actor is very episodic, and it's up and down, and there is a goal that you'd like to have at the end that could take 3 or 5 or 7 years. I don't know now that Smash maybe didn't turn out the way they wanted, if they would shy away from show business, but this to me is more my so-called life. It's not big moments, it's small, it's coming of age, it's, you know, it's struggling, it's like a happy, less naked girls, you know. But yes, I'd love to, and also I'd love to produce it, I'd love to, I mean, believe me, like the, you know, the creative part of turning it into something else would be really fun.
Anything in the works?
No, they just sent it out. They just sent it out, so I don't know. And also, then on the other hand, I feel sort of like this is just this thing I just started doing, and I'd like a chance to, I don't know, work on, because the next book would, so far in my mind, it's not a sequel, but it's a companion piece. It could have some of these same characters, and I'd kind of like to see what happens before, you know, the CW or whatever. But I don't know how it will work.
So, speaking of television series.
You're all just here for the book, right?
I'm gonna go there. So, you know, you never know. You make a really good point in this book when there's one project that a friend of hers has been attached to that looked really good in the script and looked really edgy and really smart, and then turned out to be the dumbest Friday night show about a French talking cat, right? There's Pierre.
Yeah.
There's Pierre. When you first read Gilmore Girls, did you think, boy, this is really something special?
I was too new to think about, to be savvy enough to understand what the impact something might have. At that point, I was still so excited to be, you know, up for something. I had done some series that had come and gone. I had done a couple movies, but I wasn't where I wanted to be. So for me, I always remember this. Christopher Reeve said this at an actor's studio, James Linden. He said, I know that part is right for me when I can't stand the thought of somebody else doing it. And that's how I felt when I read that script. I was like, oh, I know how to do this. And this is, And you have to understand that this is such a strange career where on one hand you're terribly, terribly nervous and don't feel worthy, and on the other hand you have to believe that this job is yours and no one else's, or why would anyone else give it to you? You know what I mean? It's this funny high-low of self-esteem, and I did have a very strong connection to it, and I did feel that I knew how it could sound. I knew what the intention was of that character, and I've been right and I've been wrong and things like that. But I definitely had a confidence in terms of what I wanted to do with it. But I didn't know. No, I remember in fact being at the upfronts, which is when they announced the TV schedule, and I didn't know what our time slot was, and they said, "Oh, you're on 8 o'clock on Thursday night," and I was like, "Wait, opposite Friends?" They were like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Oh, we're gonna get canceled." Like, yeah, I